The auction hall. The air recyclers wheezed like drowning patients, spitting frigid mist that burned Kira's lungs and froze her eyelashes. Station Helix 9's auction hall reeked of industrial disinfectant and the unmistakable musk of too many species packed into insufficient space. But beneath it all lingered something else, a faint, sweet sharp scent like crushed berries mixed with ozone, tickling the edges of her awareness. Kira pulled her thermal jacket tighter, the worn fabric crackling with static electricity, and squinted through the crowd at the auction platform. Her implant pinged, 17 minutes until her transport departed. Mercy or practicality? Save something, or someone, today, or walk away with her conscience intact but her purpose unfulfilled again. The auctioneer, a Velian with too many arms and not enough ethics, gestured dramatically at the next item. Lot 623. Rare specimen acquired from the extinction zone of the Mollyvan expanse. Bidding starts at 15,000 credits. Guards dragged forward a pitiful figure that made Kira's breath catch. A juvenile draconid, scaled body trembling, crest flattened in terror. Its wings had been bound with metallic restraints that cut cruelly into delicate membrane tissue. From this distance, Kira could see the raw patches where scales had been harvested, the biotech market paying premium for authentic draconid material. The young creature's eyes were enormous, luminous orbs of amber darting frantically around the room. Old scarring across its snout suggested previous attempts at aggression had been forcefully discouraged. The youngling wore only a tattered ceremonial collar decorated with intricate geometric patterns, symbols Kira recognized with a jolt. The patterns weren't merely decorative. They were mathematical sequences, heritage markers from the ancient calligraphy guild. The exact sequences her research team had spent years trying to decode from fragmented records, before the funding cuts, before the hegemony declared cultural anthropology economically non-viable, before Kira became a salvage runner instead of a professor. The draconid's gaze suddenly locked with hers through the crowd. Something passed between them, recognition, perhaps, though that was impossible. The sweet sharp smell intensified, and Kira realized with a start that it was coming from the young creature. A pheromone. A distress signal. The scent triggered something primal in her brain, a protective instinct that overrode her usual self-preservational caution. 20,000, called a bulky Teridian weapons dealer to her left. 25, countered a laboratory representative in sterile whites. Kira's hand rose before her brain caught up. 40,000. The hall quieted. The auctioneer blinked all four eyes simultaneously. 40 from the human in Sector 3. Do I hear 45? The laboratory rep scowled and shook his head. The Teridian glared at Kira but remained silent. Sold to the human salvager for 40,000 credits, the auctioneer announced with obvious surprise. Collection at Processing Zone 12 after payment verification. Kira's stomach plummeted. 40,000 credits, her entire profit margin from the last 6 months of dangerous salvage runs. The rational part of her brain screamed about irresponsibility, about operating costs and fuel reserves. But the sweet berry scent lingered in her nostrils, and the memory of those frightened amber eyes outweighed all financial considerations. The discovery. As Kira approached Processing Zone 12, her implant displayed an incoming transmission. A data packet materialized in her visual field, a three-dimensional image of startling clarity. 2 draconids, one clearly adult and one juvenile, nestled together in what appeared to be a snow-covered cave. The adult draconid was wounded, blood staining its scales, while the smaller one huddled close. Despite the bleak setting, there was tenderness in the scene, the adult's protective wing draped over the youngster, their snouts touching in what could only be described as affection. The image was tagged, "Mama was wounded and dying, yet told one last story to her frightened son." Kira's heart raced. This wasn't random salvage debris or black market contraband. This was evidence of something the hegemony had insisted didn't exist, draconid familial bonds and cultural transmission. The implications were enormous. If draconids possessed complex social structures and intergenerational knowledge transfer, they couldn't legally be classified as non-sentient resources. Processing complete, announced the bored-looking clerk. Your purchase awaits inside. The draconid youngling flinched when the door slid open but made no attempt to flee or attack. Up close, Kira could see the creature was male, probably equivalent to an early adolescent human. His undamaged scales shimmered with an iridescent blue-gray quality. The sweet berry scent was stronger now, tinged with something acrid, fear. I'm not going to hurt you, Kira said softly. I'm here to help. The draconid's crest flexed slightly. Skepticism, perhaps. Look, I need a legal basis to remove you, Kira muttered, scanning the purchase documents on her implant. Technically, you're classified as exotic fauna, but that image. The clerk cleared her throat. There's a loophole. Register it as a cultural artifact carrier. Section 27B of the Heritage Preservation Act. Might cost you 100 credit processing fee. Kira glanced at the clerk in surprise. I have scales too, the clerk said quietly, briefly lifting her sleeve to reveal a patch of green iridescence. Different variety, but we look out for our distant cousins. Within 30 minutes, Kira had legal documentation declaring the young draconid a living repository of endangered cultural heritage under her conservatorship. The processing fee mysteriously dropped to 20 credits, and the clerk added a notation that exempted her from mandatory reporting for 30 cycles, enough time to get off station. As they walked toward the docking bay, a group of traders laughed openly at the sight of them. Humans and their pets, one sneered. But Kira ignored them. She had more pressing concerns. The young draconid, she needed to give him a name, walked beside her with surprising dignity despite the restraints. His amber eyes missed nothing, cataloging every detail of their route with the precision of someone who had learned that survival depended on remembering escape paths. What should I call you? She asked as they reached her ship, the Wanderer's Hope. It wasn't much to look at, a modified cargo hauler with more patches than original hull, but it was home. The draconid tilted his head, considering. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly melodic, though tinged with the gravelly undertones of his species. My mother called me Star Weaver. It was the last name she gave me before. He trailed off, amber eyes growing distant. Star Weaver, Kira repeated, the name feeling right on her tongue. Well, Star Weaver, welcome aboard the Hope. We need to get those restraints off you. The journey. 2 days into their journey through the Outer Rim, Kira had managed to remove most of Starweaver's restraints using her ship's medical scanner and a lot of patience. The wing bindings had been the worst, designed to cause maximum pain with minimum permanent damage. Each time she carefully extracted another metallic barb, Starweaver's sweet berry scent would spike with pain, but he never cried out. Your mother, Kira said one evening as they sat in the ship's tiny common area, sharing a meal of synthesized protein and recycled water. The image I received, was that really her? Starweaver's crest rose slightly, a gesture Kira was learning meant deep emotion. She was the last keeper of stories. When the Hegemony ships came to our world, she gathered all the young ones she could find and led us to the caves in the frozen reaches. She knew they would come for us eventually. He paused, amber eyes reflecting the ship's dim lighting. Before the hunters found our hiding place, she made me memorize every story, every song, every mathematical sequence our people had preserved. The stories must survive, she said. Even if we do not. Kira felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's recycled air. Star Weaver, do you remember these stories? All of them. Every word, he whispered. Every note. Every number. Sometimes I wish I could forget, because then I wouldn't be the last. But Kira was already reaching for her personal recorder. You're not the last. Not anymore. Would you share them with me? I'm not a keeper of stories, but I was trained as a cultural anthropologist. I know how to preserve knowledge. Over the following days, as the Wanderer's Hope jumped from system to system, Star Weaver began to share his inheritance. The mathematical sequences weren't just decorative, they were star maps, genetic codes, and philosophical treatises rolled into geometric patterns that could be woven into fabric, carved into stone, or tattooed onto scales. The stories were even more remarkable. Epic tales of draconid explorers who had mapped the galaxy's spiral arms millennia before humans had learned to fly. Love songs that incorporated quantum physics principles. Children's lullabies that contained instructions for faster-than-light navigation. My people weren't primitive, Star Weaver said one night, his voice heavy with loss. We were ancient. We were explorers and scientists and poets. But the Hegemony needed us to be animals, so they made us into animals. Kira had to stop recording and step away. The magnitude of what had been lost, what was still being lost, threatened to overwhelm her. Entire civilizations reduced to exotic fauna classifications. Genocide disguised as resource management. Where are we going? Star Weaver asked on the 7th day. I know you didn't spend your life savings just to give me a tour of the galaxy. Kira smiled sadly. There's a place, a world called Haven's Rest. It's outside Hegemony space, run by a collective of species who've opted out of the main galactic government. They have a policy of protecting refugees and preserving endangered cultures. And you think they'll welcome a draconid? I think they'll welcome the last keeper of stories, Kira replied. Your knowledge, Star Weaver, it's proof that your people are sentient. More than sentient. It could change everything. But as they approached the Haven system, Kira's long-range sensors picked up something that made her blood run cold. Hegemony pursuit ships, closing fast. Someone had betrayed their destination. They're coming for me, Star Weaver said quietly, his berry scent turning sharp with fear. No, Kira said, her hands flying over the controls. They're coming for us. And I'm not giving you up without a fight. The chase. The Wanderer's hope shuddered as the first energy blast clipped her starboard engine. Kira fought with the controls, trying to coax more speed from her overloaded systems while Star Weaver strapped himself into the co-pilot's chair. Can you fight them? He asked, his amber eyes reflecting the red warning lights that now bathed the cockpit. This is a cargo hauler, not a warship, Kira grunted, executing a desperate evasive maneuver that made the ship's frame groan in protest. Our only chance is to reach Haven's Rest before they disable us. The Hegemony ships were gaining, their sleek military designs cutting through space with predatory efficiency. Kira could see 3 of them on her scopes, more than enough firepower to reduce her ship to scattered atoms. Incoming transmission, her ship's computer announced in its maddeningly calm voice. This is Captain Vex of the Hegemony enforcement vessel Iron Talon, a harsh voice crackled through the speakers. You are transporting stolen property in violation of Galactic Trade Regulation 847-C, surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Stolen property, Star Weaver repeated bitterly. That's what I am to them. Kira keyed her transmitter. This is Captain Kira Chen of the independent vessel Wanderer's Hope. I have legal documentation declaring my passenger a cultural heritage carrier under Section 27B of the Heritage Preservation Act. You have no jurisdiction here. Captain Vex's laugh was like grinding metal. Your documentation is fraudulent. The subject in question is classified biological material. You have 30 seconds to surrender before we disable your engines. Another blast rocked the ship, this one closer. Kira could smell burning circuits. Star Weaver, I need you to listen to me very carefully. There's an escape pod in the aft compartment. It has enough supplies for. No. His voice was firm despite the fear scent that filled the air. If I run, they'll just hunt me down again. And next time, they might hurt innocent people like you. You're not just any draconid, Kira insisted, wrestling with the controls as another blast sent them tumbling. You're the last repository of your people's knowledge. That makes you invaluable. Then we preserve the knowledge, Star Weaver said quietly. Even if we can't preserve the keeper. Before Kira could ask what he meant, Star Weaver began to sing. It started as a low hum, but quickly grew into something hauntingly beautiful, a melody that seemed to resonate through the ship's hull itself. The sound was unlike anything Kira had ever heard, complex harmonies that spoke of vast distances and ancient wisdom. "What are you doing?" she asked, even as her hands continued their desperate work at the controls. "Emergency cultural transmission protocol," Star Weaver replied between verses. "If a keeper is about to die, they can encode their knowledge into a quantum frequency burst. Any receiver within range will preserve it automatically." Kira's eyes widened as she understood. "You're broadcasting everything, all the stories, all the knowledge, to anyone who can listen." "Including the Haven's Rest communication array," Star Weaver confirmed. "They'll receive it all. The star maps, the genetic codes, the poetry, the science. My people will not be forgotten." The iron talon fired again, and this time the blast tore through the Hope's main engine. The ship lurched, power failing across multiple systems. They were dead in space, helpless. "Boarding pods launching," the computer announced with its infuriating calm. Star Weaver's song reached a crescendo, and suddenly every screen on the ship lit up with responding signals. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Ships throughout the Haven system, and beyond, were receiving and acknowledging the cultural transmission. The knowledge of an entire civilization was spreading across the galaxy like ripples on a pond. "You did it," Kira whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They can't stop it now." The young draconid smiled, his fear scent finally beginning to fade. "Mama always said that stories want to be free. They find a way to survive, even when their keepers cannot." As the boarding pods attached to their hull with metallic clangs, Star Weaver reached over and took Kira's hand in his clawed one. "Thank you," he said simply. "For giving me time to say goodbye properly." The miracle. The airlock hissed open, and Captain Vex stepped aboard the Wanderer's Hope with 3 armed soldiers. He was a Hegemony standard-issue human, all sharp angles and cold efficiency, his uniform pristine despite the pursuit through space. "Captain Chen," he said with mock courtesy, "you've caused us considerable inconvenience. The stolen biological material will be returned to proper containment, and you will face charges for trafficking in." He stopped mid-sentence as the ship's communication array erupted in a cacophony of incoming signals. Message after message flooded in, each one containing the same essential information: the cultural transmission had been received, recorded, and was being retransmitted across the galaxy. "What have you done?" Vex demanded, his hand moving to his sidearm. "We've given the galaxy back its memory," Kira said calmly. "Every university, every archive, every cultural preservation society in free space now has complete records of draconid civilization. You can't classify them as non-sentient anymore, the evidence is overwhelming." Vex's face darkened. "Evidence can be discredited. Witnesses can be silenced." But even as he spoke, more signals arrived. The Haven's Rest Parliament had called an emergency session. 3 major news networks were requesting interviews. The Galactic Archaeological Society was demanding immediate protection for all draconids under the Ancient Civilizations Preservation Treaty. "Sir," one of his soldiers said quietly, "we're receiving priority orders from command." Vex listened to his earpiece, his expression growing increasingly thunderous. Finally, he snapped, "Stand down. New orders, minimal force only. The situation has changed." He turned back to Kira and Star Weaver, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "It seems your little stunt has created a political incident. The Hegemony Council is re-evaluating the classification status of draconids pending a full cultural assessment." "Which means?" Kira asked. "Which means," Vex said through gritted teeth, "that I can't simply execute you both and claim it was self-defense. Unfortunately." A new voice crackled through the comm system, warm, authoritative, and speaking in perfect galactic standard. "This is Administrator Shen of Haven's Rest. By order of the Galactic Cultural Preservation Authority, the draconid individual known as Star Weaver is hereby granted full refugee status and protection under the Ancient Civilizations Treaty. Any attempt to remove him from Haven's system will be considered an act of war against the Free Worlds Coalition. Vex's jaw worked soundlessly for a moment. Finally, he keyed his own transmitter. Iron Talon to Haven's Rest. We acknowledge your authority in this matter. The Hegemony vessel will withdraw from your space immediately. As the soldiers filed out, Vex paused at the airlock. This isn't over, he said quietly. The galaxy's a big place, and the Hegemony has a long memory. So do the draconids, Star Weaver replied, his crest rising proudly. And now, so does everyone else. After the Hegemony ships departed, Kira and Star Weaver were escorted to Haven's Rest by a flotilla of Coalition vessels. The planet itself was beautiful, a blue-green world with 3 moons, its surface dotted with cities that seemed to grow organically from the landscape rather than being imposed upon it. At the spaceport, they were met by Administrator Shen, an elderly human woman with kind eyes and silver hair braided with small trinkets from a dozen different worlds. Star Weaver, she said, bowing deeply in the traditional draconid manner. The Free Worlds Coalition is honored to offer you sanctuary. Your knowledge has already begun changing how we understand galactic history. And Captain Chen, she continued, turning to Kira, we have a proposition for you. The Coalition is establishing a new department, Cultural Recovery and Preservation. We could use someone with your skills and particular moral compass. 6 months later, Kira found herself back on Station Helix 9, but this time with official credentials and a Coalition enforcement team at her back. The auction hall was closed, its operators under arrest for trafficking in sentient beings. The Velian auctioneer, the one with too many arms and not enough ethics, had been extradited to face charges on 17 different worlds. Star Weaver was with her, now serving as cultural liaison for the newly established Draconid Preservation Council. He wore robes of deep blue silk decorated with the same geometric patterns as his old ceremonial collar, but now they were symbols of hope rather than loss. The database says there are still 47 draconids in captivity throughout Hegemony space, he reported, scrolling through his data pad. Most are listed as exotic specimens or biological resources. Not anymore, Kira said firmly. As of yesterday, the Galactic Court ruled that all draconids must be reclassified as sentient beings with full civil rights. The Hegemony has 6 months to comply. And if they don't? Kira smiled grimly. Then the Free Worlds Coalition has promised to make compliance involuntary. As they walked through the now empty auction hall, Star Weaver paused at the platform where he had once been displayed like a piece of merchandise. You know, he said thoughtfully, I've been thinking about what Mama used to say, that stories want to be free. I think she was right, but incomplete. How so? Stories want to be free, he said, his amber eyes bright with determination, but sometimes they need someone to set them free. Thank you, Kira. For giving me the chance to fulfill my mother's last wish. Thank you, Kira replied, for reminding me that some things are worth more than credits. They walked together toward the docking bay, where their ship, now christened the Star Weaver's Hope, waited to take them to the next station, the next auction, the next soul in need of freedom. Behind them, the empty auction hall stood as a monument to changed hearts and open minds. In the distance, a young draconid's laughter echoed through the corridors as he played with other refugee children in the Coalition's temporary shelter. The sound was sweet and sharp, like crushed berries mixed with ozone, the scent of hope. The stories were free now, spreading across the galaxy like seeds on the wind. And wherever they landed, they brought with them the truth that had always been, that sentience wasn't defined by species or classification, but by the capacity for love, loss, and the desperate need to be remembered. Mama's last story had become the first chapter of a new beginning. The end.